Yes, yes. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Matters Thursdays. I'm your host, Dr. Monica Ogando, and I'm excited today because we are going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, darling, and that is, are we spiritually designed to make assumptions? You know, here in the Daily Huddle, we talk about always audit your assumptions, but is that something that we are designed to do? Just make assumptions? We're going to talk about it today. And I'm going to give you the short answer and then I'm going to give you the long answer. Okay. So the short answer is yes. In many ways, we are spiritually and psychologically designed to make assumptions. It's part of how we navigate the world efficiently. Assumptions are a natural function of the mind. They help us process information quickly and recognize patterns and make decisions without having to reanalyze everything from scratch. From a spiritual perspective, assumptions often stem from our past experiences, from our beliefs, our subconscious programming, and many spiritual traditions teach that the mind creates shortcuts based on conditioning. But true spiritual growth requires us to challenge these assumptions, to audit them, as you will, and seek deeper awareness. And the practice of mindfulness, of presence, and discernment helps us to separate truth from illusion, maladaptive coping mechanisms from true discernment and wisdom. Now, from a psychological and evolutionary standpoint, assumptions are really a survival mechanism. Our ancestors had to quickly assess whether a rustling in the bushes was a predator or just the wind. Waiting for 100% certainty could mean death. And in modern times, we still use assumptions to make sense of complex social situations, to predict outcomes, and to form expectations. So I want to make that distinction that unchecked assumptions can lead to misunderstandings, to biases, to conflicts. Spiritually, we are called to move beyond knee-jerk assumptions and cultivate a higher level of awareness. And that's why wisdom traditions often emphasize self-inquiry, self-observation, detachment from rigid thought patterns, because growth happens when we question our assumptions rather than be ruled by them. You want to balance intuition and discernment, trusting the wisdom of experience while still staying open to new possibilities. And that, my friend, is why here at the Daily Huddle, we talk about always audit your assumptions. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Don't necessarily pivot. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pivot. It doesn't mean that you're on the wrong track. It doesn't mean that you got it wrong. It doesn't mean that you're being naive or you're being biased. Just check them, audit them, see if they still make sense, see if they're still useful, see if they're still relevant. And if not, then where is the lesson? And if there is no lesson, now you're free to discard it, right? You're just checking. That's all we're asking you to do here at the Daily Huddle. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that we are in many ways spiritually designed to make assumptions, but that's because we are multi-layered beings. We are not just a spiritual consciousness. We're also a physical presence, a physical animal, if you will, right? And so in many ways, we have instinct, not just intuition, right? We have survival drive, not just success inspiration. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing those lower needs, not impulses, but those lower needs, such as survival, such as, hunger, safety, certainty, et cetera, without being driven by them. There's a difference between addressing the need and being driven by them. Now, some of you know that at the end of every, around December and the beginning of January, and almost all of January and most of February, I lead myself through a 40, now 47-day fast, a 40-day fast. And in those 40 days of only drinking water, a lot of assumptions come up. A lot of things that we would ordinarily not question come up. Chief among them, when are we going to eat? Right? The assumption is that you're going to eat. And when you're on a fast, that's an inaccurate assumption. We're not eating. At least we're not eating for 7 days. Right? Because I've now moved it to eating once a day on Sundays, but that's another sermon for another talk show. And so when this happens, this is something that I have shared with you in many occasions here in the Daily Huddle. When this happens, I am confronted with how much of our social life and our social connections, business transactions, etc., revolve around food, and how much of our mental load is looking forward to it, preparing for it, going grocery shopping for it, cooking, prepping, cleaning, eating. It's a lot. And when you remove it from your day-to-day life, what do you do with all this attention and all this mental load and all this energy? First, there's this physical thing of, you go through hunger and you go through, experiencing your cravings without actually satisfying them, etc. But for the most part, the question is, what am I available for now that I am not distracting myself? And I use the example of my yearly ritual as a segue into how you want to relate with your assumptions. If I were to take this assumption out of my way of thinking, out of my beliefs, out of my expectations, out of my just the way that I do relationships, the way that I do myself, the way that I do life, if I were to take that assumption out, what am I left with? And if I were to use this assumption, what is it giving me, right? What is it protecting me from? And what is the price and the payoff that I get to pay for navigating with it? That's part of auditing it, right? And some of these lead to very vulnerable realizations. So, for example, this is something that I talked to my daughter about, so quite recently, actually. She's going through a personal challenge, and I haven't heard from her. And at first I thought, well, maybe she needs a little bit of space just to figure it out, et cetera, et cetera. But then after I hadn't heard from her for a few days, which is unusual because we talk almost every day, not talk necessarily, but text, just kind of keep in touch because she lives in another state. I hadn't heard from her. So I checked in and I was like, hey, what you doing over there? You all right? You need something? What's going on? And she broke down crying. She was like, oh, I'm so happy you gone. I'm just so stressed. And I was like, well, you're not doing life by yourself. You have people that love you. You have a mama that loves you and wants to support you. Like, what's up with this isolation thing? And her vulnerable share to me, which I've been cleared to share with you all, don't think I'm spreading somebody's business. Her vulnerable share to me was, growing up, she didn't feel safe to share when something was troubling her, to share when she was going through a difficulty. She was expected at her father's house to kind of just deal with it, buckle up and just handle it. And don't talk about the troubles that you're having, and don't make a mess of it. Just handle it. And I said to her, that could be very useful in the moment of like moving through something that you don't have time to be, getting consensus from people and making sure that everybody's all right. Sometimes you just have to move and you have to make an executive decision about something that's happening in your life. I get that. And then there's some times when you don't know what to do, how to move, and you're feeling overwhelmed by certain feelings or stress or whatever. And do something helpful, such as reaching out, such as I need help, right? And so the permission sometimes that we need in each other's lives, in each other's relationships, could be something as simple as just reaching out to a friend and checking in with somebody and say, "Hey, I haven't heard from you. Are you okay? Is there something I can do for you? Do you need a friend? Do you need a hug? Do you need a breakfast? Do you need a, do you need to run it? Do you need to vent, etc.?" Right? Just checking in. Don't assume that there's something wrong or that they're giving you the silent treatment or whatever the case may be. You never know what somebody's going through or what you're going through even until you actually check yourself, right? And so that's my invitation to you today is how am I making sense of my world? How am I making sense of the way that I move? And are some of those assumptions outdated, maladaptive coping mechanisms, or are they still useful? And if they're useful, uh, what is it preventing? What pain is it preventing me from feeling? Or what hardship is it preventing me from experience? And how can I up level? How can I be even more aware of what it is that I'm doing as a consciousness, as a spiritual consciousness? How can I be even more present and aware to how I am navigating this thing called life, so that I am not only useful to my future self, but to those that come behind me and I lift as I climb, right? So I want to open it up to you. Let's talk about some of the assumptions that you make and whether or not they're useful. And I already went first. My daughter and I both have this one in common, which is when we're struggling, we isolate. We don't talk about it. We don't complain about it. We don't go out there looking for help or empathy or sympathy or support or nothing. We just go in a little corner and lick our wounds. And when it's over, then we'll come out as if nothing happened, as if all has been well all along. What are some of the assumptions that you make with how you navigate life? And it could be a positive or a negative one. Because a positive assumption that I make is in the absence of news, that's good news. It may not be, but that's the assumption I make until I audit it. What about you? What are some of the assumptions that you live your life with? Don't all go at once.
Well, for myself, Dr. Aganda,
Yes,
um, I'm trying. I don't know how to think about this one because I know the creative source would not have us walking around every day thinking about the day might be your last day.
okay.
Or
Why
what
not?
I think. Well, why? Why would you want to keep that on your mind if you got things that you're trying to accomplish that the day might be your last day? I mean, it
To
might be something you
create
might think.
urgency, to create
Well, no, I
urgency,
mean,
to
hey,
appreciate the
listen.
present moment.
Yeah, you listen, but why would you want to create that? Why would you want to have that on your thought every day that today might be your last day? I'm thinking like this here. Now, mind you how I'm saying it. I'm
Okay,
not saying that thought doesn't cross your mind, but
sure.
that's not something you want to keep on your mind all day long.
Okay,
That's my point I'm making. That's not.
okay,
I don't think the creative source wants you to walk around every day waking up. Oh, it might be my last. I don't see how that could make you feel good.
okay,
You got to think about things you want to accomplish and you want to see done for that day. You can't keep on your mind that it might be your last day. You got to keep on your mind what you want to do that day.
all right.
You know, so I'm saying that I'm trying to find that balance where, okay, I get up and I remind myself, hey, this may be my last day. I never know. Let me live this day to my fullest, but
Mhm.
not at the same time feel fearful about it might be my last day.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Anybody there?
I was wondering if it's me. Can you hear me?
Just now, it sounds like it froze for a good while.
It froze for a good while. Awesome. Is Dr. Ogando back or not yet?
I don't see her anymore.
No yet.
I was like Mastermind Stan bringing back his stuff from last night to the Daily Huddle.
That's what I thought it was. I thought it was just me. So I went, I was getting ready to log out and everything and log in.
Me too.
Else.
I was getting ready to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think what it is Dr. Ogando probably froze on her end.
Well, it froze on all of us. So she should be back soon.
Oh, okay.
It was a Zoom problem.
Yeah.
Did we all get disconnected?
Yeah, we
did.
didn't get disconnected. We just got paused. We all got paused.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay, Zoom, I see you.
Yeah.
See, we all made an assumption that Zoom was going to just behave today. And surely we had to audit that assumption. All right. So the last thing that I said, what I was checking for, Giovanni, because you had your hand raised. Did you want to say something, Giovanni?
Sure.
Okay.
For me, I'm in the car. So. For me, assumptions I live in, there is the ones that I am conscious of, and then there's the ones that I am not conscious of.
Yes.
And the ones that I am conscious of, I live quite intentionally, is to daily, or as much as I remember, right? Daily reinvent myself against a possibility that it's all possible, that I don't need to know what things are for, and I am committed to bring love, my expression of love to those around me. That's a philosophy I live in, conscious of. And I think there is one I am unconscious of that every now and then surfaces for me. It's my fear of another human being. So I think that's one unconscious of. I think it's a survival mechanism of my brain. I don't necessarily live in fear, but I certainly am afraid of messing up with another person. I'm afraid of another person going wild and crazy. I'm afraid when I go into a supermarket that somebody is going to show up and do crazy things. I'm afraid that my team is going to turn on me, and I'm afraid that someone's going to sue me. There's a fear around people, but it's more at the level of unconscious or subconscious that every now and then surfaces for me. And then I wanted to say my last thing was on the eternal or the not eternal, my last day on earth. And that has evolved for me. That has evolved for me. In my younger years, I could care less whether I die tomorrow.
Yeah.
Then with children, then it became meaningful and significant. And then now with a certain spiritual growth, and I don't know how long it would last, I certainly see the opportunity of my last day as an opportunity to be grateful every day.
Yeah.
Because it will come and it will show up, and there's nothing I can do about it. So it leaves me in a place now with spiritual growth. It leaves me in a place of being grateful, where at some point there was fear. So that's what I wanted to say about it all.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you. That was a lot, and a lot of wisdom packed into a very succinct message. So thank you for that. I like something that you said here in terms of thinking about your last day, or that today might be your last, fills you with gratitude and the possibility of just seizing the moment, as it were. Because I think that, time is not linear necessarily. Time sometimes constricts like an accordion and constricts and expands depending on focus, energy, attention, interest, etc. I don't know if you've ever noticed, I'm talking to everybody here, but sometimes when you are spending time doing something that you absolutely love, you actually kind of lose track of time. And before you know it, an hour, 2 hours have passed, and you haven't, you forgot. It felt like 2 minutes to you, right? And when you're doing something that you dread or that you're resisting or that you don't feel good at or comfortable with, et cetera, now 15 minutes can feel like 3 hours, right? And so part of auditing your assumptions, part of checking yourself is to check in with yourself about where your energy is. Because nothing has any inherent meaning in and of itself, right? I'm going to use Kobe Bryant as an example. For the late, great Kobe Bryant, spending 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at the gym training or conditioning or shooting hoops or whatever might feel like this is a nice way to relax, to hone in on his skills, to sharpen the saw, as it were. To me, spending 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at the gym shooting hoops feels like punishment. That's not my bag. Basketball's not my ministry, right? And so for you, it's the same thing, that there are certain things that are in your bag that are something that you can surrender yourself to, devote yourself to, and hours pass and it feels like a moment. And then there are other things that 15 minutes pass, 3 minutes pass, and it feels like torture. And so part of auditing your assumptions is to check in with your own energy about where you are with something. And sometimes it's as simple as getting present to your resistance to release it. Right? Sometimes we kind of brace for impact and it's just like an instinctual thing. It's not because it's warranted. It's not because there is imminent danger ahead. It's just a reflex. And so you can get present to yourself and you're like, oh, I'm in reflex. Let me get in presence. Yeah. And by doing so, you open yourself, as Giovanni mentioned, to possibilities that you might not have otherwise considered, were it not for just the act and the decision to get present. So I love what you said there, Giovanni. Anybody else have something to contribute? What are some of the assumptions that you operate out of? Good, bad, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. Unqualified.
I have something else to say.
Okay.
But if you want, I can wait a few minutes so somebody else can chip in.
No, I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, great. So I was present to what you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
and I was present to what Stan was pointing to.
Mm-hmm.
And then my brain went into this direction. I want to share where my brain went to.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I am clear that I no longer do the thinking. I'm just the observer of the thinking.
Nice.
So,
okay.
So I want to excuse myself for whatever comes out of my mouth. It wasn't my fault. I meant that though. So as I was listening to this conversation, I was thinking, for most of my life, I've been hiding my love for what I say God is and my connection to what being spiritual is. Most of my life, I've hid it.
Okay.
I don't, like, when I talk to my team or people who are trying to do marketing for me, initially they always say, oh, so you're like a spiritual leader. And I'm like, no, do not put me in that category. God forbid. God forbid,
Lord.
No. But most of my philosophies or my way of living in life is very spiritual-like in many ways, right? And my business is created around that. But I don't want to be labeled as spiritual. So here's what I was going to say. As I was listening to you, in my 20s, I really thought there was no God. In my 30s, I really thought it didn't matter if there is one.
Okay.
In my 40s, now I think, how could you possibly live without the connection of it all? So
Uh-huh.
what I was thinking was, well, I don't think there is a command from above on what to believe, on what not to believe. I think it seems to me that there is the inquiry of it all that is possible as collectively with you and everybody else. There is the possibility of the inquiry. And for me, I have found that the inquiry is so spiritual.
Yes.
In many ways.
Uh-huh.
So that's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to add to the conversation.
I love it. Thank you for that. The inquiry itself is an act of devotion. I think part of
Devotion, I wouldn't say devotion if you were recreating me. It's
okay.
an act of, if you were recreating me, I wouldn't call it devotion. I don't think God wants anyone to be devoted.
Okay.
Or maybe that's the rebel in me. But certainly the inquiry gets me closer to that which I find in my heart God is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you're saying reminds me of the ways in which I have experienced someone being with me in a very significant moment. That it didn't require a problem to be fixed, an issue to be solved, words to be spoken even. Sometimes just the presence and being in connection with someone, in contemplation, like we're both kind of contemplating this concept that you've presence for us. The act of a shared contemplation sometimes feels much more intimate than if we were to physically touch or be talking with words, et cetera, et cetera. And it strikes me that what you're sharing in terms of how your thought about God has evolved to be friends with you, to witness you move through that evolution and that growth and allowing a change of mind or reverting back or moving forward or whatever the case may be without any kind of agenda about what it should look like. In itself, that contemplation is what I was meaning in terms of an act of devotion.
Yeah, very intimate. I love what you said. The act of contemplation is a very intimate act.
Mm-hmm.
And I really get that. I really get that because when I am with another human being and I'm not trying to fix or judge or look for a solution, just the contemplation itself creates this bond in the relationship that I don't have access to that bond if I'm trying to solve a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that is so great. Yeah, that is so valid for me.
Yeah.
Damn, you're a rock star.
Look at you. So all I'm saying, and I'm driving this around to the assumption conversation, which is contemplate, right? Sometimes audit your assumptions feels confrontive. It feels like an examining and, we're about to get you fired or we're about to lay you off, whatever. But maybe just contemplate them. Sometimes they're useful. Sometimes they're completely irrelevant. Sometimes they're outdated. Sometimes they've served their purpose and they're just sitting here because you haven't put them anywhere else. And so, that contemplation, that harvesting of your own garden in your mind is an act of devotion to your potential, to your greater power, to your connection with the divine, to your commitment to being a contribution to the people that you love and serve. And so, at every moment, life is always asking of you, who do you say that you are? Who do you say that you are now? Who do you say that you are now? And sometimes we answer it with like, I'm a toddler about to have a tantrum. Leave me alone. And sometimes you are the space where possibility can exist and people can come and contemplate their own version thereof. So I really, really love the way that you put that, Giovanni. That you've made me think about stuff. I'm not gonna go journal. I have half an hour between me and that next meeting. So I'm gonna go journal on that. Thank you for that. And for the rest of us, thank you so much for being here with us. I appreciate you. Remember to live, love, laugh generously, eat more plant-based food, exercise. Remember that twerking is a Kundalini raising exercise. Rest, give yourself 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep, depending on what your body's calling for. You know, and audit your assumptions. Yeah, that's a good practice. We love you. See you next time.